Hello, everyone. Thank you for your patience. Anybody who's jumping in live, I am so excited. I'm here with Jon. I'm going to bring him on in just a minute, and we're going to talk about building. We're going to talk about building healthy community, and I'm so excited about that. As you know, we're in the middle of a series, a healthy community series, identify, exchange, and build. And right now I'm doing a little workaround to see if I can get this streaming in to the Intuitive Daughters of God Facebook group. Okay, I think maybe we've got it. This will get less clunky as I figure out what I'm doing. This is actually my very first time doing this, besides one time that I experimented. So, yay. Okay. So I think we should be live now in 3 places, including the IDG Facebook group. So if you're watching on there, I'm curious if the comments will come through. Say, oh, Julie, yay. Awesome. Oh, I'm so excited. Success. Sweet. Okay. So, healthy community series. So far we've gone over identifying, like how to identify a healthy community. Now, of course, there are ranges of health in people and in communities and how we operate, but we're just looking for some kind of general, like a lens, a parameter, something that helps us when we enter into a space to be able to identify the general health level of that community and of the leaders, but doing it without judgment, really entering in with curiosity is what we've been talking about. Then yesterday, we had a conversation with April on how to engage in healthy ways as we enter into a community and within the communities that we're already a part of. Hi, Val. I see you too. Hey, would you guys tag some people? Sweet. Thank you. Thank you. That is always super helpful. All right. And so today we are entering into the third part of our Healthy Community series, which is building healthy community. And this is not actually a training, although I am going to have a training on that. And I'm curious, for those of you who are watching live or who are in the replay, is anybody interested in let me know if you're interested in actually connecting in Zoom and having a Q&A. Because I know that we have some leaders and emerging leaders in this space. And this is such a great conversation for those of you who plan on leading a community, or that you're currently leading a community or on a team. But also, even if you're attending or participating, you're a member in a group, you're still part of building in that space, because building isn't just about the framework, it's also about the environment, the atmosphere, the ecosystem, which you are an integral part of. So I am so excited to bring Jon in today, and I'm going to go ahead and give him a little intro, and then I'm going to bring him on screen here. So yeah, thank you guys. I see you tagging people. Thank you for that. That is fantastic. Okay. So, Jon Berghoff. Okay, Jon is the creator and founder of XCHANGE, is considered a pioneer in the field of transformational group facilitation. He is the collective wisdom whisperer, love that, to global CEO summits, leadership conferences, and high stakes gatherings for organizations like Conscious Capitalism, Women Presidents Organization, HeartMath, Arthur Page Society, NASA, Keller Williams, BMW, Google, EOS, Facebook, and many more. Over 15,000 coaches and consultants and change agents are now using XCHANGE, including yours truly, to redefine how we unlock potential at scale through transformational learning experiences. So you guys, welcome Jon. Hi, Jon. It's so great to have you.
Hey, Nanette, how are you? Can you hear me okay?
I can, and
Awesome.
I am so great. I'm so great. It's such an honor to have you.
I'm thrilled to be here, yeah.
I don't know if I have actually told you how we got connected.
I'd love to
Um,
know.
yeah. So back in, I want to say September or October, maybe even earlier, you were running one of your 101 workshops. I noticed you have one coming up, by the way, so we can probably chat about that later. But um, I was introduced to you through Pete Vargas, and I was introduced to Pete Vargas through Pedro Adeo. And so that was kind of like the trail that led me. But what really caught my attention was in the email that Pete sent out talking about unlocking collective wisdom
Mm,
and the importance of what I would term the synergistic approach
mm,
rather than the hierarchical type of approach. And that just captured and captivated my attention. I was like, okay, I need to know more about the intentionality of facilitating in this way, which is really what you and the exchange approach bring. And then I ended up going to OXE in December. And that's a 3-day immersive experience in the exchange approach. So that is how I ended up getting connected to you and exchange and your team. And it's been an amazing ride ever since. And we've had so much awesome feedback from the ways that we've implemented the exchange approach. So thank you so much for that. Really honored to have you, Jon.
Oh, you're welcome. I love hearing that story too. Yeah. Yeah. Well, happy to connect on anything you want.
Yeah. Well, lately you've been doing some emailing talking about the importance of community.
Hmm.
And I was like, well, that's what I'm talking about too. So we should probably talk together.
Yeah.
So, yeah, thank you. Can you tell us a little bit about your background when it comes to leading and building community?
Sure. Yeah. Well, as you mentioned, I met you through our business today, which is it's all about how do we tap into the potential that
Mm,
lives in a group, and specifically, we've been very privileged, in my opinion, to meet thousands of folks like yourself who, whether it's trainings or workshops or leadership conferences, mastermind groups, whenever the goal is to multiply learning, but also there's a value for human connection and
yeah.
and below that community, like that's our
Mhm.
interest today. And how we got to this, as is not uncommon, I think, for entrepreneurs. It was largely accidental. I was an executive for the Vitamix Corporation.
Yeah.
We sold blenders,
Yeah.
and as their head of sales, I was running these meetings all over the world. And what I noticed was we would say to ourselves, like, the whole purpose of this meeting is to multiply learning. It was trainings, and we say, yeah, we got to strengthen the culture as well. But
Yeah.
what we stumbled into over a number of years in many meetings were several realizations. One was, so many gatherings are leaving a lot, that we're not tapping into, right? How many of us
Mhm.
have left a training, workshop, meeting, whatever it is, and be like, oh, we left something on the table. So
Yeah.
it's like, oh, there's this potential. But then probably the biggest discovery, Nanette, which is I think why you wanted to chat today, was the realization that all these reasons we're saying we're coming together to learn, to be able to create, solve, think,
Yeah.
that to really tap into those, if we connect people, if we facilitate human connection in a way where people experience certain things, there's a biology to this.
Yeah.
I can actually get to the part of my brain once I feel safe, once I feel like I
Yeah.
belong, which how badly is that needed right now, right?
Yeah.
Now
Yeah.
I can do all these other things that we say we're here for in these meetings. So that's kind of how we got here.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I love what you're saying when you're saying basically you there there is an understanding that we're not tapping into our full potential, and part of that is because due to the way that our brain works, we can sometimes be very guarded, especially in when we're entering into a new space, right? And
Hmm.
so in that guardedness, which is natural and is even sometimes has the benefit, we can also get we can also prevent ourselves from being able to engage fully and get the most out of an experience and even bring the most of ourselves into that space, right? Which
Hmm.
prohibits the community and that human connection from being as true and pure and deep and, alive actually as it can be, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and if I can say one thing about that,
Yeah.
I think we are living at a time where so many things about our world right now
Mhm.
are creating the conditions. Here's a simple way of putting it.
Mhm.
Our world is changing in ways that are faster and more extreme than many human beings feel equipped to deal with that change.
Yeah.
And you can actually see the result of that through so many different sources of conflict and tension. So what you just described is unfortunately a byproduct of some things that are systemic right now.
Yeah.
And I don't think those sources of disruption and chaos and uncertainty are going to go away. Anybody who explores history or
Mhm.
systems, unfortunately, might agree. But there's an opportunity there. And the opportunity is, so the resolution to what you're talking about, this stress and self-doubt and
Yeah.
reactivity that we're walking into so many situations with,
Yeah.
is how we design and run our meetings, is to
Mm.
realize there's another way to bring people together so that the questions we ask and the conversations we facilitate
Yeah.
can help people to get present, to regulate their nervous systems and
Yeah.
get to their back to their best selves, which is what they deserve.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've had the chance to participate in and even facilitate those types of experiences, and the results are, you can tell it hits somewhere really deep in people to be able
Mm,
to feel safe enough to connect at that level. So
yeah.
can we actually talk about psychological safety a little bit, because that's a
Sure.
conversation that I know came up in our OXE, our online, which is OXE is online exchange experience. That was the 3-day immersion.
Yeah.
And I believe you came in and actually unpacked it a little bit further because so many people were asking about this. And it's such an
Mhm.
important topic. So I would love to hear a little bit more about what that means and
Mhm.
how we cultivate that.
Yeah, so I'll share a story. This comes from an hour ago. I was working with one of our students, one of our members, and he was telling me he just led his company's kind of annual celebration company event. Right?
Yeah.
He had 200 people in the room, including spouses, and they were at one of these very common celebrations where typically in the past he and or his fellow owner executives would have said a few things and then they would have had dinner and been on their way. What he decided to do was instead invite the room to have small group conversations and then even
Mm,
invite them to share into the whole room what they talked about. And the types of questions he asked were, why is the work that we do so important? He had them share stories that
mm,
reminded them why their work was important. And he had them share stories of when they've been at their best over the last year. He had them share stories where they appreciated each other for
mm,
embodying the values that they wanted to embody. And what he told me is he said after the meeting, he said he had a number of people come up to him and say, number one, it wasn't just the most engaging meeting they'd ever led. That starts to be
yeah.
obvious. He said he had people telling him that in their conversations, they were revealing things that they had never before revealed. He told me about one of his employees was in a small group conversation where somebody opened up about a tremendous tragedy, but how by
Mm,
being a part of this organization, they were able to get through it because of how they were treated.
wow.
And ultimately, what he was talking about, we talk about vulnerability, but vulnerability that's invited not through command or control or
Yeah.
coercion. You all need to open up. No, people need freedom of choice. But the structure of what he
Mhm.
did invited people to feel psychologically safe enough. And we can define that as people willing to take risks, speak
Yeah.
up, speak their truth, have a differing opinion. And you need that. In
Mm,
fact, there's research that goes back
yeah.
25 years. It's a leading indicator of a healthy group team gathering. And that's the essence of what it is. And we can create it through the way that we convene people. And we can also support it through how we carry our presence as a leader, teacher, facilitator. So happy to
Yeah.
go wherever you want on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, Yeah, that is actually, so my thought as you were sharing this is also when somebody does take a risk,
Mm,
what happens in that moment? What happens on the back end of that? How is that received? So it's so interesting how many different dynamics are in play. But
mm,
when it comes to leading, it's not just about leading in, um, somebody feeling confident enough to open up, but then what do we do with that, right? And I've heard you
mm,
talk, we do reflections, right? And reflecting
mhm,
back to people, and which is simply saying like, "Oh, I see you, I hear you, this is what you said, and this encouraged me," or I can connect with that, right? So can you share a little bit about any of the psychology or experiences or anything related to um, the idea of just kind of holding space and reflecting back a supportive space to somebody who has taken that risk?
yeah. So a couple things come up. One is, and let's talk biology for a minute, or if we want to be like super technically accurate, it's the neurobiology. There's a
Yes.
relationship between our body, our mind, and how we interact.
Yeah.
So every one of us, we're all wired in a way where we all want to know an answer to a fundamental question. It's a
Mm.
survival instinct. We're wired to need to know, can I be me and still
Yeah.
fit in with this group, these people, this moment, right? It's
Yeah.
about psychological safety, but it's connected to just knowing, am I literally safe?
Yeah.
And that part of our wiring is critical. It's kept us alive. But your question around how do we nurture that, people
Mhm.
being able to answer yes,
Yeah.
one part of it is when people do take a risk, how do we respond? Right?
Mhm.
When someone makes a mistake, what's our reaction?
Yeah.
Because if someone speaks up, takes a risk, or maybe makes a mistake, which was a part of a risk, and they get shamed or beat up or responded to in a way that they don't feel good about, well, they're not going to take a risk. The fact they might not want to be around us anymore.
Yeah.
The alternative is what you're saying, which is even if I don't agree with somebody, like what they're saying, I can at least understand, respect, or appreciate somebody for having the courage to speak up, speak their truth, take a risk,
Yeah.
whatever it was that made that mistake. I'll give you one other thing though, Nanette. I watched you do this just at the start of this little thing. I was like in the backstage or whatever it is, and you were like pushing some buttons, and I heard you, and you acknowledged to whoever's watching or listening. You're like, "Hey, I'm kind of trying something new. I think I heard you say, and I don't know if this will work." That's actually an example of another contributor to others feeling
Mm.
safe, because what you did is you took your own risk, and what I consider the most important risk is being willing to be ourselves in front of others, but
Yes.
specifically our true imperfect selves, right? And
Yes.
that's what you were doing. And
Mhm.
so unconsciously, anybody watching you in that moment, they're like, oh, Nanette's okay with the fact that she doesn't know if she's going to hit the right button. Maybe I'm okay making mistakes, taking risks, or just being myself.
Yes.
Cool, carry on, right? So it's also how we carry ourselves
Mhm.
and allow people to see us just as we are,
Yeah.
including our imperfections, that can actually help others to feel safe.
Yes. I love that. I love that. And I've seen I've seen you do that several times actually. And isn't it funny how like when somebody else has those moments of imperfection and then they choose to highlight them even,
Mm.
like not
Mhm.
only not hide them, but sometimes say like, "Hey, did you notice this?" And then let's talk about that, right? There is something really freeing and empowering about being in a space where the leadership is it is dedicated to transparency and is dedicated to learning from mistakes and is dedicated to saying like I'm not going to hide the fact that I'm human and that like we all struggle with tech and like figuring things out or whatever. This is real life, right?
Yeah, yeah,
But it does give that, I hate to say permission because I feel like we give ourselves permission, but it creates a space where we're like, oh, I can give myself permission to do that too.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And if anyone's listening to this and they're thinking, well, that all sounds nice, but when everything goes sideways and, we train facilitators or coaches and consultants how to lead groups, right? And one of the most common questions is, hey, it's great when things are going according to plan, But what do
Mhm.
we do when there's lots of eyes looking at us and something is happening? Somebody says or does something and it goes sideways. And, it's important to remember that that's where we, as the leader, the person teaching, convening, whether it's with a title or just because in that moment, that's what we're doing, we have to have had a commitment to doing the kind of inner work
Mhm.
when nobody's looking, so that when something does go we call that a moment that matters, because if I'm facilitating a leadership conference with 200 CEOs in the room, which is a very common thing for me, somebody says something that all of a sudden creates a moment of tension. In that moment, there's a concentration effect where my ability to self-regulate and how I respond, people are going to decide what they think of me right there, more so than the other 99.9% of the time. Because it's like, okay,
So true.
let's see how the real true guy deals with this right here. And so, in lieu of a lot of dedication to contemplative practices, to how we take care of our mind, our body, our soul, like in those
Mm.
moments, remembering to breathe, remembering that we don't have to have the answers or know what to do, and
Yeah.
remembering to have just compassion and curiosity
Mhm.
for people who are bringing these things into the room instead of trying to control.
Yes.
Right? If I can go from trying to control to just having compassion and
Yeah.
being curious, that's a good first step.
I absolutely love that you brought up really the contrast between needing this feeling of needing to have control
Hmm.
and just being curious and holding space and be like, "Oh, that's interesting," right? Like,
Yeah.
I wonder, and just having that posture of curiosity has been so empowering for me because I grew up in a household that did have a lot of control and a lot of volatility. So it was a very interesting combination. And
Mm.
I actually wanted
Mm.
to bring up, by the way, families and things like that. So
Sure.
I'm,
Yeah.
I was like, oh look, I'm accidentally segueing into where I wanted to go next. But I have found that for me, when the environment I grew up in, and some of that environment was not just my home environment, but actually the religious environment that I grew up in.
Hmm.
I have had so much unwinding that has happened in me because I was raised to at least attempt to take control and that's what leadership did.
Mm.
And seeing examples and even being trained in new ways of doing things where really the what creates a healthy atmosphere is really allowing curiosity to replace this need to control or this desire to control.
Mm.
That's been revolutionary.
Mm.
And it really does. Like, I didn't realize how unsafe I felt in highly controlled environments until I realized how nervous I was to even let go of the idea that leadership is supposed to be in control. Like,
Mm.
what do we do if leadership isn't in control?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
turns out we have a lot more fun.
Yeah. I agree with that. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and what you're saying is it's actually it's counterintuitive, and it's also kind of contradicting what our culture and society and even
Yeah.
just entire paradigms around what does it
Yeah.
mean to be the leader, teacher, manager? Like, aren't you supposed to know what to do? Well, let's just get present again. Like, if there's anything that the last 5 years should have taught all of us, is it's that we control is an illusion.
Yes.
And maybe at a different time in history, like 100 years ago, the idea that a few of us have the answers for the rest of us, and that's what it means to manage and lead, that actually made really good sense, and it got us to where we're at today. Everything industrial and technological, these
Mm.
revolutions, we can thank
Yeah.
for ways of thinking,
Mhm.
but these paradigms and some of the values behind them can now actually do more harm than good. Like,
Yeah.
so I lead a team of 14 people at Exchange, And I'm in a meeting every single day with people on our team where I and no one on our team actually knows how to do the thing we're trying to do. And if I'm not willing to admit that,
Yeah.
then I'm gonna, self-deceptively steer us in the wrong direction, as opposed to owning that and saying, well, what questions can we ask
Yeah.
so that we can hear everybody's perspective, or maybe go get answers from outside of us? That's just a new approach to leadership. Instead of the sage on the stage, it's a guide on the side that says,
Mhm.
how do we get the answers from wherever we need to get them from? And I think people actually value that
Yeah.
today a lot, right?
Mhm.
If I'm willing to acknowledge my mistakes, if I'm willing to allow people to see me change my mind, that actually gains influence. And yet that's counterintuitive to what we see in so many different places.
Yeah. And I love how you're saying it. It's countercultural because there are
Right.
these societal constructs that have been created, enforced, and reinforced. And I think because we do focus a lot on how in this space we're highly intuitive. Um, Even the word counterintuitive, I feel like, you know, I, I wonder if our actual intuition as we kind of peel back these layers of social construct and our actual intuition is allowed to come to the forefront,
Mm,
it's raising its hand like this isn't actually counterintuitive. This
yeah,
is
I like that.
intuitive, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
like, hey, I've been over here the whole time. But we get in these spaces that were created for us, and we begin to live that way, and to
Mhm.
go against that particular current can sometimes feel super uncomfortable.
Yeah,
So I'm about to close out, but I did want to know. I know you're such a family guy,
sure.
and with family first, how does your approach to family inspire healthy community, and even vice versa, as you're really diving into and exploring all of these things that has to have had impact on your family, and the way you do family has to have had impact on the way you lead? And I'd love to know just like just a little nugget or story or anything you want to share.
Yeah. Well, yeah, my family is the first place where I get reminded every day that I don't have all the answers. And,
Great.
as soon as I think I'm enlightened, I only need a few minutes with my family to be reminded of all the places I gotta keep working on myself.
Okay.
I
Yeah.
think, I think for me, my kids especially they're my greatest teacher, and specifically, they're my greatest teacher of where I still have work to do. And one of the things I learned just from being with my family is I get to learn about my triggers. I
Mm,
get to learn about these parts of myself that are seemingly still unconscious.
mhm.
And intellectually, I know, like, not to lose my cool or react or snap
Yeah.
in a certain way. But I think for me, it's true, and maybe it's true for others. I think my family is often the place where,
Mm,
um, if I'm willing to look in the mirror, they are the mirror that
mm,
allows me to see the truth that's going to enable me to make the most progress in my
mm.
own growth,
Yeah.
because they, for whatever reason, are the place where I'll continue to be reminded that some wounded part of me that I've not healed or worked on, I still need to work on that.
Yeah.
And then that I get to bring back to work, because when I'm not at my best, or I'm under stress, or I'm under pressure, I lose my ability to pause, to breathe, to notice, and to have the highest response when I'm with others. And so I think I'm being a resource, but my
Mhm.
reactivity is actually a demand. And
Yeah.
my family is where I learned that the
Yeah.
best. And so that's what
Thank you
comes up
for
for me.
sharing that. Thank you for sharing that. That really touches me, and as reflective of a lot of my own journey with leadership as well. And I have a 9-year-old and a 4-year-old, so my kids are
Mm,
still on the young side. And my husband is has been working away from home for almost 3 years now.
mhm.
It's been pretty intense at times, and they are definitely my how I'm doing. If I'm around certain people, I won't actually know how I'm doing, but around my kids, it comes out. And if I'm
Mhm.
not doing okay, it'll come out in how I am with them. And I'm like, okay, clearly I'm not okay right now. I should probably go explore that, do some self care, talk to somebody, that sort of thing. So I've journeyed through a lot of that type of thing over the past few years in particular. Um, so, anyway, thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And for everything, for all the wisdom. You truly do carry so much wisdom. I'm so thankful for you bringing that into this space, John.
Yeah, happy to.
So, I always like to conclude with what made you belly laugh this week. So, what did make you belly laugh this week, John?
Oh my goodness. So I coach one of my boys. His name is Kai. He's 10. I coach his baseball team, and it's there's so many dimensions of it, but these boys are. I've been coaching the same team for 3 years, and we just won a big tournament last weekend. And what's really funny about these boys at this age of 10 is they are right now they're playing really good baseball, and we focus so much on leadership and character and discipline and dealing with adversity. And there was one moment last night at practice where it's this heated, intense moment, and I'm giving them all coaching on a mistake that we had just made, and we're re-drilling it. And I look over, and one of these boys is just for no reason at all doing one of these video game dances, these video games today. And and I'm like trying to be this intense focused coach, and I lose it. I totally lose it. And I thought, this is so healthy. And if
Yeah.
I don't allow myself to smile at that, then I'm missing the point of it all. So that it's yeah,
Oh,
it's funny. Actually, yeah, I have a video on my phone of the exact moment I'm talking about. I'll forward it to you when we're done here.
oh yes,
So
please
funny.
do.
Yeah, yeah,
Oh, that is so fun. And it's so relatable because I have a 9-year-old who's almost 10. And so he'll break out in dances and do goofy things while I'm trying to
yeah,
have serious talks all the time. And
yeah,
yeah, it's fun. Thank you for sharing that with us. So
yeah.
speaking of sharing, let's share with people what you have coming up. Do you want to share about the 101 workshop?
Sure, yeah. So if anybody wants to find us, they can find us at the letter X, the word change, approach, exchangeapproach.com. And we got a workshop coming up on May 16th. If I'll be leading it. I don't know how much longer I'll get to lead these, but it's a live experience of what we teach and what we do at Exchange. So anybody who's curious about leading groups, whether as a trainer, a coach, a consultant, whether someone has never done that or they've got 30 years of experience, our method can be powerful in how do you create the kind of safety and belonging we're talking about so
Yeah.
that you can create really powerful group experiences. So always happy to meet folks at these workshops. It's the main way that we introduce our work to the world. So thanks for
It's
letting
such
me
a
share
great
that. Yeah.
yes, it's such a great way because you are actually engaging and experiencing the process while
Hmm.
learning about the approach. So it was super beneficial for me. I highly recommend anybody who plans on doing any facilitating of any groups to go do the 101 workshop. And you will definitely glean some nuggets and be like, whoa, there's this whole other way. There's this whole other world. And it's so, so good. Unlocking that synergy. I love it. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, John, for joining me again. This has been awesome. And I really
Welcome.
appreciate you coming and bringing your wisdom and experience into this space.
Nanette, you're so welcome. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Bye, everybody.